When we come back from our break, we're going to then talk about the medicine wheels, concepts, and laws, and how do they fit to steps. Because then they make you want to look forward to doing the steps. So let's take about a 14-minute break. Finding those issues which help us discover that knowledge of the Creator. It is through the defect where we discover that knowledge. That doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong. Now, in the medicine world too, we often talk about the 4 directions of things. So we'll talk about the 4 directions of life: baby, youth, adult, and elder. And that's our directions. That's the way life goes in a circle. But very often when we come into recovery, many of us, there is a place where the medicine wheel is broken. And for many of us, that medicine wheel is broken between the youth and the adult. Because you see, we grow up or whatever, then many of us, we start drinking when we are in the youth. So physically we will grow up. Our bodies will grow, we get married, we have children. But emotionally, we are like teenagers. We don't grow up, we're immature, even though we're older. I remember when I first come into recovery, I went through divorce and all that stuff. Then when I finally got to that point, I went in a relationship. I went out with this woman twice, and I found myself going in my jewelry box trying to find my class ring. I wanted to go steady. Hell, I was 33-year-old. They don't even go steady no more, right? But I wanted to go steady. I wanted a pinner, so you show all your buds. She's wearing my ring. Christ, that's, nearly halfway to the coffin, and I'm still, still going this old way. So very often when we come back and we work the steps, it's about growing up. It's about coming back to that place and continuing my growth. Does that make sense? There's this broken. It's not good or bad. It's where we stop in the unseen world. So we got to come back there, do some things, and grow up to become mentally healthy and mature. Now, what we're leading up to is, because the steps is to take a look at the human being who is in recovery from a native point of view. Well, let's look at what would it look like for a native person to grow up. Did the Creator make a path of things that we are supposed to experience as we grow up? Is that already in place, or is it just an accident? Or is there something we are supposed to do? So if we look a little bit further at what is it like to grow up as a native person, because if we have an idea about that, then we get into the steps, we look at the steps, or we read the big book from a native point of view. So we want to just take a look at this cycle of life. So we're going to look at that, and then we're going to go and apply just these basic concepts to an approach through the 12 steps from an Indian way of looking at it. Now we're going to talk about these developmental cycles here and about growing up. See, very often we judge one another just based on things that we see about one another. So we look at that one, we say, oh, those Indian men, see, they can't trust, don't talk, don't feel. That's what you hear sometimes about that. Or look at that stone face, or that one don't talk, or this one does that, or see. So we tend to start judging and putting people in categories, but a lot of times we don't know what's really going on inside of a person. Sometimes we don't even know what's going on inside of ourselves. So we want to talk about growing up. Because it seems that the Creator He made a system for us to grow as human beings, to grow up to be mentally healthy. That there's certain things we're supposed to experience, and if we don't experience them, then we will see behavioral differences later on. So we want to talk about that. So when we look at certain things in the steps, we're looking at it with a point of reference that will make sense to us as human beings. So if we take a look at the cycle of the life of an Indian person, and this applies, I think, to any human being, But it seems that when a baby is born as a human being, one of the first things it needs to experience is a sense of trust. And this might be from birth to maybe 18 months. That time frame, that child needs to experience a sense of trust. It's a feeling. In other words, that little baby, you see moms, they always hold them every time they cry, and they touch them and carry them, and they do all this stuff, just constantly with them. That's why in a traditional way, they carried them every place they went, right? In a traditional way. They never, the discipline, everything was just, no matter whether they worked or what they did, they just had that baby hanging on them all the time. Now what happens, see, because there's two roads, let's supposing that the baby, like the sense of trust, it doesn't develop a sense of trust. See, a sense of trust, when you have that, is a feeling, and it's this feeling, it's like the world is a good place, and man, I belong in it. See, that sense of trust. Because if you don't have a sense of trust, there's two roads, then you have a sense of mistrust. So if you have a sense of mistrust inside of that human being, then later on, you'll see behavioral differences occur. So if I have a sense of mistrust, in other words, the world isn't a good place and I don't belong here, then later on you see wall builders, difficult time in relationships, cannot connect, see, cannot be intimate. So as we look through these steps, when we start to realize now that maybe trust is an issue. That's the normal state for the human being. See, I thought for a long time trust was abnormal. You're stupid to trust. Where I was raised, it's dumb. When I was drinking, I would never trust no one I didn't drink. Geez, look at the guy. Don't drink. Don't trust him. Right? It's like you don't know what you don't know. So I thought you only trust, you trust your buds that are drinking. So I thought it was abnormal for a human being to trust. I thought it was stupid if people trusted. But then later on I learned that the fish by its design was designed to swim, the bird was designed to fly, the human being is designed to trust. That is a natural state of the human being. But I didn't know that, see, until a little bit later on. Now, let's just say that like a baby, they have this thing called TLC. Like a long time ago in Germany, they used to find that most babies put in orphanages died. They'd feed them, change their diapers, but most babies put in orphanages died in the 1800s. So when they started to research that, they found out in Germany there was this orphanage where the babies weren't dying. So they sent a little team over there to say, why is that happening? Well, somebody got over there. There was this big German lady, and she had, work there, but she had this system. She'd hang a string of diapers. She'd have this diaper hanging on her shoulder, and she'd have one kid in that little pouch. This side, she'd have another pouch, see? She'd have a kid hanging in there, and then she'd have one on her back, and they were hanging on her back, 3 of them. So she'd walk around doing her work and cooking, see these babies are just flopping all over her like that. Well, what they found out was that was this simple. Those kids had developed this sense of trust, and so they would continue to live. See? So one of the things we need to know when we come back to this principle, laws, and values, when we start to change our thinking, if I find and I discover, look at my unmanageability, or I get, see, where am I in terms of spirit and intent with that? If I find out I'm a mistrusting person, I have a lot of mistrust, well, then what happens if I go work on that? See, where am I in terms of spirit and intent with that? If I find out I'm a mistrusting person, I have a lot of mistrust, well, then what happens if I go work on that? Because very often we work on symptoms. There's something wrong with me in relationships. I cannot be intimate. I just can't take risk. I got to learn to be a risk taker. But can I be a risk taker if I don't create back within myself a sense of trust? So if I work on the trust, will the risk-taking ability change without me working on it? So I'm working on the right stuff. So you can, listen, I don't know what I don't know. You can work on the wrong stuff and be working on the symptom and it won't ever change. Even it was just really a struggle. Now the neat thing about the human being is, if we have missed something in this developmental process, we have the ability to go back and put it back inside of ourselves. See, to be restored to sanity. So we have the ability, if we've missed something, so most of this that we're going through, these developmental stages, is to kind of get from, I don't know what I don't know, to now I know what I don't know. So once I know these things, as I start to work those steps, and you see, I should be able to really accelerate my growth and really grow at a very sound path if I know how the Great Spirit made us, and I work in harmony with getting me back to that system He made and not invent it. Now let's just say that you have a little baby, say 18 months old, has developed a sense of trust. In other words, they have this feeling, and we've seen some of them, the world is a good place, and man, I belong in it. And then they start walking. Now the adults will call that next stage autonomy, or it also means a sense of independence. So a 2-year-old, when they can start walking, it takes 3 adults full time, see, working in shifts just to hang with them. See, because they get up there, you start setting them on the ground, and their feet are going like this. They're just waiting for you to let them hit the ground, and they're off. And they're into everything. I mean, they're just into the dirt, and they're tasting this, and taking toast, and bumping it in the milk, and reaching in and squeezing it, and making messes, see? Now, what's the 2 most favorite words of a 2-year-old? No. Now, at that developmental stage, that 2-year-old, it has to develop a sense of independence. So they try to break away from mom and dad. I am my own person now. So you want to do this? No. Well, let me butter this. I'll do it myself. You need this? No. No. See, and a 2-year-old would be a perfect juvenile if they could just drive a car. Right? They just tearing everything up. Now you'll see very often, like say 2 daughters come over to mom's place, each has a 2-year-old, and one of the moms will come over and they take their 2-year-old and they sit him on a chair, and she just sits there, so perfect and so proper. The other sister brings her kid over, and I'm telling you, that little boy just tears grandma's place up. He's into everything, the pots and the pans and exploring and doing all this stuff. And they say to that person, why isn't that one like that good little girl? That good little girl may very well be the one that's not developing mentally healthy. You see, because you're supposed to develop that sense of trust, that sense of that freedom. Because it's at that stage where you start to learn to make choices and decisions. I'll do it myself, thank you. So when you see those little 2-year-olds doing that, you see, when you see them making a choice or a decision, like they draw this weird thing or whatever and they show it to you. Ooh, I like how you decided that. You're something. You're good at it. And you see them, they walk around, nose up in the air. Ooh, I'm good at it. So at that stage, you see, you're supposed to develop that sense of independence. Because if you don't develop that sense, it's a feeling, a sense of being independent, then what will you see later on? Can't make decisions, indecisive, see, wishy-washy, not taking risks, afraid of this, afraid of that. Does that make sense? So when we start to develop ourselves and go through the steps, if we start to come back and take a look at this developmental cycle as we work the steps, and I see I'm having trouble with choice and decisions, or I'm having a hard time in relationships, and I can ask myself, do I have this feeling of independence? If not, then maybe I need to go back and do something to bring it back inside of myself so I can have that stage, because that's how the Creator made me. He says, one thing to grow up in my world that I created to be mentally healthy is you must develop a sense of trust. That you belong in this world, it's a natural state for you, you see, and you love being here. And not only that, you function from choice and decisions. See, that you have the ability to do that. On what? Well, that's really handled in a step. Like you you see, where is it you function from trust? At the level of spirit and intent. Trust in that sense is a decision. If you trust someone too much, that's not trust. Right? That is a different issue than trust. And that's some kind of a fear. We'll get into some of that. Could we just ask that one just a little bit later? Because there's more information that will really help. It's like you cannot... Trust is not a volume. Trust is a decision. So you cannot trust too much. That's called some other things, but not trust. Any other questions or comments on this? The next stage you go through is a stage called initiative. And this happens about ages, or maybe 4 to 7. Now you see little kids, what you'll see them is all of a sudden they just go from tearing everything up. All of a sudden you see them, they become really pretending type. They have like imaginary friends, pet turtles, and they make you set places for them at the supper table. Sit here in front of my friend and they talk to them just like they're real. And then you'll see them, they do all sorts of weird things. You know, one day they'll have a pan on their head and they pretend to be a policeman. Then the next day they're like a cop. Then the next day they're cowboys and they want all this stuff on them. See, well, it's at that stage they are developing, and so they're saying, I wonder what it's like to be a policeman. See, so they put a pan on their head and they run around blowing sirens and doing that stuff. And the next day, I wonder what it's like to be a cow person, you know, a cowboy. And so they start shooting like this, so you see, do all this stuff, and you'll see them sometimes, they'll come up like on their, they'll pretend like they're a dog. See, they'll come up, woof, 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 and or bow, wow, bow, wow. And they'll see, grab your pant leg like that, and they'll sit up and bark like that, and you reach up there, get a cookie, see, make them speak, see, and you give them that cookie, pat them on the head, see, kick them in the, see, and help. Now it's okay, see, if you're 3, 4, and 5 doing that, but if you got a teenager that's doing that, like barking like a dog, you're really in trouble. You got a sick kid. See, it's really bad, right? So it's at that stage where they are developing now imagination, the ability to vision, creativity skills, so they're developing that. Then you'll see this young person will grow, and they'll come to that next stage of development called industry, or another word for it is sense of accomplishment. So at that stage, these are those pre-teenage years, there's 2 feelings that the human being needs to have. One feeling is, I'm good at something feelings, I'm good for something feelings. We need to have that feeling, I'm good at it. Now you'll see, like culturally, we knew who we were. You see, there's that, why am I, who am I, where am I going? We always knew, well, you know him, he's a hunter. You know her, she's the... And that feedback was always to give us that feeling of being good for something, good at something. You see, a lot of teachers are pretty good at it in schools. They have little badges and little happy faces, you know. You go up there, you get your test, you go, ooh, look, you get a blue happy face, see? Man, you're something. See, I'm good at it. So you get those I'm good at it feelings. So you'll see boys clubs or some of our drum groups. You know, what they're doing is they're giving those youth those feelings, I'm good at it, I'm good for something feelings. Because you see, what happens if you don't develop those feelings? It's a polarity system, so I will develop then, I'm not good for nothing feelings. I'm not good at anything feelings.
Excuse me, what age would that be?
8 to 12. That's the pre-teenage years. So if you develop at that age, I'm good for nothing, I'm not good at anything feelings, then later on you'll see behavior. Hey, why don't you go try this? Oh, not me. But I think you can draw, you can... No, I wouldn't be good at it. See? And you even see in body language, they're just not good at anything. You know, those type of feelings. And you'll just see a resistance and can't make decisions and just real withdrawal, see, type of things. So it's at that age, it's very, very important, you see, to develop within the human those 2 feelings. Now let's say I get in recovery and I can examine through the set of steps that I don't have those feelings. The neat thing about the human being is I have the ability to come back and develop them. I need to have those to grow mentally healthy. Now you take a look at how many of us have been raised in dysfunctional families. How many of us have been raised by alcoholic parents like me? How many of us has many of our relatives drinking? How many of us have been told, I mean, did somebody, like when we were growing, did we develop a sense of trust? Or did we have good choices and decisions like 2-year-olds, you see? When you're supposed to be going, no, oh yes you will, shame on you, bad girl, bad boy, smack, see, slam, kick. Then all of a sudden you don't develop those feelings, that's normal. So as you start to grow up acting a certain way, there must be something wrong with me. Then you start into some of the violence and some of the sexual abuse and some of the other things many of us have experienced. So we start to grow up with no sense of trust, no sense of independence. I am good for nothing, you're good at nothing. Even the input from schools and all these different things. So we start to grow up as Native people, growing as dysfunctional families, not having these feelings which the Creator designed for the human being to have. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah, you just described one of my second grade classes. A majority of the second grade class that I had show a lot of the signs and symptoms. And, you know, what they're talking about a lot of times is when they're talking about mom and dad, broken promises. And they don't trust. You know, they don't trust. And they're all, you know, they're just second graders.
Yeah. Oh, see.
You know, I can just imagine, you know, if we're doing the best we can. Imagine what it would be like in a couple of years. You know, and a lot of it is because the parents are alcoholics.
Absolutely. But even for us, you know, as Native people, alcohol is but a symptom. There's other things that we have to work on. But I think you see a lot of that in our kids. Ourselves grew up that way, many of us. That's the way it was. Now, we just grew up thinking that was normal. I didn't know there was another way, right? It's like my dad would go drinking or whatever. Well, we knew, you know, his patterns really well. And we heard when he come back to the res. You know, we always had like a lot of old cars and stuff out in our backyard. So we'd hide food in there. So when he comes out the back window, you go back to where that food was, we had stuff stashed. See, hoping he wouldn't come find us. And but we weren't the only ones. See, a lot of people did that. That was just the way you did it. It was a real, now, you know, it's a survival thing. But you see, well, it's just like myself. When I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family. And when I was in this age here, from age since where I'm supposed to be developing a sense of industry or accomplishment, from a time I was a little before I was 10 years old to a little after I was about 11 and a half, I was sexually molested by an uncle, minimum weekly. So it was also one of the favorite uncles, come from a large family. And that went on all the time. Then one time he went to the res, to a party there, and somebody shot him 6 times. They got a big fight. I was so happy when it happened. But then when I saw how my mom and everybody acted, they were all sad. I had the wrong feeling there. I was glad the son of a bitch got it. See, is how I thought. And I never ever told anybody that ever till I was 33. But then you'd see me in relationships. Relationship after relationship after relationship. I built these walls. You see, and I just couldn't let anybody through. And God, I wanted to. Or sometimes you'd see a woman, you know, that would have that insight to get through those walls. I was just giving signals, see. Come on. You know, back. Come on. Back. And they would say things like, you know, you never let anybody close to you. You oughta. I couldn't do it. It was just a paralysis. So what I just go drink some more. See, so I just go through them, but I could never get a relationship and keep it. I couldn't even tell you how I felt. I didn't recognize feelings. I was 30-some years old. It actually wasn't, in a certain case, about 2 months ago, I was telling Deborah, when you feel like this, what is that called? I'm still discovering them. Before that, I went through a thing where I went through a set of steps and everything. I had a whole bunch of them crop up. I didn't know what that name of that was. I never had that. I had to run around trying to find out what is the name of this thing. When you feel like this, when this thing isn't there, what is it? I didn't know that. But you see, the law is, it doesn't take account whether you are a child or not. It doesn't take account for that. It takes account for whether you live in harmony with it or not. If you are raised out of harmony with it, then your style of life is going to be a certain way. The only catcher is, the human being can change, and I as a human being, it doesn't matter who did what to me. Bottom line, see, is this like what did I really want this relationship with my uncle? After he died and after I started, try to get free of it? What I really wanted is I wanted him to come back to life. Just give me a day with him. That would have done it. Then he could have died and I could have went on, died again. I could have went back and forgiven him. But he didn't come back. So I spend this time, you see, what's wrong with me? I must have done something wrong and dwelled in that forever. See, really was impactful. Even though I kept it hid, it touched every area of my life. There was no area of my life wasn't touched. Job, relationships with children, relationships, every place was because of that issue, but I couldn't bring that up. So I hung on to it. But then you would take a look at me. My sister used to call me on guard. She said it in our language, but it meant on guard. See, I could never sit with my back to the wall. And I always knew where the doors were. See, even at the supper table, we'd eat. I couldn't sit in the middle because we had a large family, like a table. I could never sit in the middle. I had to sit on the end. I couldn't do it. See, and I just eat, never said nothing. Always watching. See, and a lot of those things you see that's happened, like your dad will come up and say, I'm going to ask you the truth I'm going to ask you. One time tell me the truth. You tell him the truth. Bam! Right across the room. So pretty soon you learn, you're going to get it anyway, just say nothing. Right? Don't say nothing. So see, then you start to grow up that way, and then you become very silent. So then, now do you not say nothing to him? You take no risk. You tell nobody nothing, unless you want them to know it. Or you might tell them something, you see, to use or to manipulate. But you don't tell them anything. Because if you do, you see, you're going to get it. Does that make sense? Now, you just take, once we come to the stage of identity, and these are the teenage years. See, at the stage of identity, this is a very, very critical stage for the human being. This is the first time in the life that a human being will consciously seek the answer to those three questions. Teenagers do. Why am I? Who am I? And where am I going? And that's why you see them doing all those weird things. Geez, one day their hair is green and they wear these kind of suits, and see, a week later, they're dressed like this, they like this kind of music. So at that identity stage, the human being must have this feeling, the feeling of belonging. It has to belong. It's a feeling that it seeks. So you'll see them clusters, they get little groups. Right? They find out mom and dad, what kind of music do you like? Country and western, they like rap, see. You're out, see, we're in. So they start to develop, you see, this identity. And you see them do a lot of weird stuff from an adult's point of view. They're just really weird. But they're seeking out, that's why gangs are so effective. See, in our culture, it wasn't that difficult to get an identity because we hunted, see, we fished, we cured, we tanned, we did all these things. But you take these modern times, hell, you don't need to hunt, you don't need to cook. See, when are you one? When I get my driver's license? Geez, I can't wait. 16, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Then what's next? Well, drinking, say 18. Well, I can't wait to get there so I can be one. So we end up with our identity, with a heart. See, that's why gangs work so well, if you think about it. See, it's very hard to be somebody. You take native people, come into an urban big urban society, if we don't have, good like drum groups and powwows and that kind of stuff where people can start to develop that, gangs always fill that need of belonging. You know him, he's the Lord. You know her, she's the. You see? So gangs are very, very effective. Now what will happen, say as we grow up and we don't get an identity, later on, maybe in the late 30s, you will see very funny behavior among like men, for example. You'll see a lot of alcoholism, suicide, a lot of depression. You'll see a lot of them will dump their wives about that age, and they go back and they try to find one 17, 18, 19, see, 20. Real young ones. And you'll see them, they'll even dress funny. They'll like roll their cigarettes up in their T-shirts again, you know how they used to do, Lucky Strikes or whatever. They roll them up in there, and they dress in green hats and purple pants and pink socks, and you see them coming to a party. Smack open the door, run to the middle of the living room, jump up on top of the coffee table, and they make the announcement, "I'm here, the party can begin." See, the kids here, see, acting like a teenager. They're trying to recreate the past. And so we'll see that type of behavior happen later on. Then we get that stage of identity, like in the late, maybe 19, 20 years old, if we're growing up normally. So it's at that stage we're supposed to be searching, trying new things, finding the answer to those three questions. Who am I? Why am I? And where am I going? So once you get, yes?
You're talking about men act that way. You know what? How women go back that way if they don't develop through the identity properly?
Same way. You'll see a lot of different behaviors in women also doing that.
Yeah, Don, one of the things that you touched on that was real important to me about my recovery is like all the time I was sedated, I was, like I'm catching up. And like somebody, I'm criticized sometimes because, they might say that I'm having like pre-adolescent, childlike, or adolescent behavior. But that's natural for me because I know where I'm coming from. But one of the things that you don't hear a whole lot of dialogue about is men trying to catch up emotionally, let alone women. And a lot of the times when I see it, you might hear somebody share at a meeting that you might have known for a long time, and they're starting to identify it because we're able to read between the lines a little bit. But it's not talked about openly.
Oh, no.
And I've heard very few women talk about trying to catch up. Like for me, like I was a stone-going alcoholic when I was 15, and like now, probably, maybe I was about 19 or 20. And one of the things that's been exciting for me is because I was sedated, like during those real important years, like when you date, it means a lot to me now. Like it's even like basically just holding hands, something like that. It means a lot to me, whereas I see a lot of other people, young or old or adult, take it for granted. And see, with me and my development, I don't take anything for granted anymore. It means a lot to me. So like I said, you don't hear a whole lot of dialogue on it. And I think it's real important that we as men and women should start talking about and start getting into, and I don't know, I'm just excited for myself because, I'm not worried about whether I catch up or not, but it's just being able to identify what I've lost and just kind of holding on to it and just going through my own pace.
Well, there's more and more Native people are getting longer-term recovery than we've ever had before and in larger numbers. But one of the things we're finding in a lot of communities we work in recovery, people are stuck. There's like a level you get to, and it's like, so, like what next? And I think we need to start sharing some of that new stuff everyone is working in. But once again, you think like you're the only one who has it.
Yeah, because I just had a birthday on the 21st, and since the 21st, I've been kind of like going through a renewal phase. So like it's a real exciting time for me, and I kind of almost feel like I'm in my first year of sobriety. And, that means a lot to me, But more importantly, I've been able to share that with other people, which is real exciting, and they understand.
Sure. Did we answer your question about women's behavior?
Well, I don't know, in my experience, when I reached that point where I was supposed to have identity, I was abused, and I shut off. I turned off, and I stayed turned off for many years, and then I turned to alcohol.
Uh-huh.
And many of my sisters had babies. Mama was saying had babies at that time. You know, I had a clinic, so I didn't have babies. But for me, I don't recognize what I missed in that development. So I wouldn't even recognize if I were back into it. Because maybe for men, getting up and partying and having sex and going to women is natural for them in that period. But for us to do that is aberrant behavior. Because 14 to 17, women shouldn't be doing that. So we aren't really going through our adolescence again when we're doing that. We're punishing ourselves.
Right.
So it is a totally different experience for us. But I don't know what that experience is. I don't know if they even have.
Deborah?
Yeah.
I'd like to say something, but I don't want to insult any of the elders in this room. I love my parents very much, but they were not all well. My father is an alcoholic, and my mom is an alcoholic as well. And their behavior at the 50 and 70 years old is exactly like it was when they were teenagers. Yeah. She's got the same hairstyle she had when she was a teenager. He's got the same hairstyle he had when he was a teenager. Their bodies today, but mentally and emotionally, they have not changed. They have raised 11 children, and most of my brothers and sisters are either alcoholics or drug addicts or someone in prison. Throughout the whole time I was growing up, the same scenario played over and over and over again. You know, he would break her arms, and she would run away, and they would get back together. But they were locked in this game with each other. And they're 60 and 70 years old, and that game still takes place. And they can't see that they're locked in it. They're not well, but they progressed physically. They got old physically. Their bodies are old, and their behavior is that of a teenager. And women behave that way just like men do. And I don't think necessarily that they see it, and I don't think necessarily that they do it intentionally. When we're in some of the communities, Indian communities all across the country, what I see, which must be incredibly frustrating for somebody that's 16 or 17 years old, is I see those 16 and 17-year-olds trying to figure out what they're supposed to be as an adult, and what they're looking at or experiencing in the whole community is a bunch of teenagers in old bodies. And they're having a real hard time. They get real rebellious, and it must be scary. If I think about it, I had no idea. I don't know how to resolve conflict. You hit or you run. You know, you are the aggressor or you run away. Those are your two choices. I'm 41 years old, and I'm just figuring out now, you know, how you get to the other side of conflict. And there can be, everybody can have their own opinion and not be wrong. I'm just learning that. You don't understand that intimacy. And when you're 16 and 17, and you're starting to come into adulthood, how do you know what's an adult if you've never seen it or experienced it? You have no idea. And I don't know about you guys, but I have these aunts, and I love them dearly. And I'm Dawn has the same kind of aunts that they're really nice, they do that. Little curly hair on the top, and it's long and straight, and curly on the bottom. That's the style of the 50s, and it's dyed jet black. And it's like they've got stuff in that era. And I'm not saying this to insult them. I'm just saying, I don't think they even see it. And it's like, we can't give our children to that next stage if we don't grow up as adults. If we don't go back and repair that thing, our kids don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. It's our responsibility to show that.
You know, some of the lines of what you're talking about, like when I was growing up, you know, I'm 45 and I look around and I ask questions to other people my age. Well, I felt 45 when I was in the 5th grade. You know, I was ready to retire with all that responsibility that I had, you know, with a job, taking care of, you know, 7 sisters and 3
Sure.
brothers. My dad always out looking for my mom, me taking care of my mother. You know, I was an old man. You know, when I got into junior high school, I was ready to go out and pasture. I really was, you know.
I was the hero too in my family.
Yeah.
The only one
Oh,
who
but
graduated
you're not
high school, the only one who go to college. And you do that. And I was my mother's mother, and I was my father's mother, and I took care of everyone. And I'm not saying I'm anywhere near well. I'm saying I'm still learning to do. And for those girls in the family who took all the responsibility, kind of lighten up and be a child or a child.
You see, that's one of the things I appreciate in this writing, but I'm starting to lighten up. But the important thing to me is to be able to recognize a lot of things and accept them for what they are. But I was funny to myself. You know?
All right, up front here.
From a woman's point of view, I knew exactly what he was talking about when he put his cigarettes in his sleeve. Actually, because I did that. And went to the party and jumped on the coffee table and said, "I'm here." Well, I didn't hear that he went to a party chasing women or anything like that kind of thing. It was more of a personhood type thing, and identifying myself in some way and then expecting you to recognize and accept me and revolve on me when I got there. Sometimes if you don't recognize the stage, it's possible to take these issues have to be resolved trust and time and you not recognize it's like if you're in a step and you can't relate to it, maybe you can go back up and support it, that kind of thing. You know, maybe it's something else that's not resolved. So maybe I would think around the molestation issue there's a lot of autonomy to be having your own body and being able to say, no, this is what this body is supposed to do, and not having done it, and not being allowed to taking that taken away. That was just my thought, really.
I was talking to Sue Elder yesterday, day before yesterday, and I asked her, I says, what is shame? You know, looking at it from a culture point of view. And she sat there for a long time. And she come back and she says, shame is the deepest wound that a human being can experience. Shame is of all of them, that is the deepest one. And I just thought about that. Because that's a lot, you know, of what we have, many of us, how we have been raised. Those are the types of things we need to work in the recovery process, is to find a lot of that, because it's inside of ourselves. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about too, about when you're talking about the man and how he's dressed. I went through this, you know, in recovery. I went through this. I'm not alcoholic. I'm an Al-Anon. But what I found myself doing in recovery after I'd been in a while was that I realized that I never honored my femininity. You know, it's like growing up as a teenager. I mean, I looked nice, curl my hair, you know, did the makeup. But then, always growing up with responsibility, I was also that 45-year-old woman.
Sure.
Which is exactly what my mother did. My mother, like, never went through adolescence. It was like immediately she was this 45-year-old woman. Having had a child at 17, I was ready to be that 45-year-old woman. And so what ended up happening was that I gained a lot of weight, you know, 35, 40 pounds, no longer had that picture of femininity. You know, it was like I was just this big thing. No feminine, no masculine, just a being, you know, like, because I was afraid. I was afraid of being attractive, because what happens? What if you are? What if you have to deal with all the feelings?
That's right.
And saying no, exactly what you were talking about. So what I ended up doing in recovery, once I lost some of that weight, was that I started to dress and to act inappropriately. You know, wearing clothes that didn't really, it looks great on a young teenager. I mean, how many times do you walk down the street and you see, you know, women who are in their 40s or something, and it's like, you go, why is she dressed like that? You know, it's like, that doesn't look great on her teenage daughter. And I did all that stuff. I did that, trying to reclaim that part of me that I lost. When I'm a 40-year-old woman, you know, in a 12-year-old body.
Sure. Jerry?
I think, well, Jerry, I'm an alcoholic. Hear a lot of things and here they're really good, and it's really important that we ask these questions and also that we take back to people who sponsor some of the solutions that we hear in here. I believe a number of us, because we grew up in dysfunctional families, are stuck in the survival mode because that's how we grew up and it's the only way we know. And so for me, getting into recovery and trying to do some of the recovery steps, I always go back to that. And a lot of times I catch myself doing it, not that it's even justified, it's just a snap reaction. And so for me, sharing with other alcoholics and being involved in something like this is really important because it gives me an opportunity to listen how other Indian people, how we survive in the world. You know, and actually after survival we come to live. And right at that point, I'm learning to trust. Just barely learning to trust. I'm 8 years sober, and I'm just now developing a sense of trust in non-Indian people. It's taken a long time. And I think that search for identity that comes with adolescence is something that I'm just not getting in touch with. And so it's important that as alcoholics we continue to work the steps of recovery, especially into the inventories. Because it's in the inventories, I believe, that we begin to find some of those issues that keep us from becoming the people we can be.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry.
I had a question on that medicine wheel that, you know, for the areas of development. It sounds, or it seems to me like when kids grew up in the 50s in BIA school, that it's probably added to, you know, the child not fully developing. And a lot of those people who are educated in BIA school are now parents or grandparents, and it sounds like that adds to dysfunction.
Well, one of the things is that you touched on is really critical for us to look at as Native people. In part of recovery, and we find in this is really critical for many of the tribes and us as individuals. And there was this one point, I was, when I come in get sober, I was very angry. I mean, almost violent. That's the only thing I knew. So anyway, as I worked through that, there was this one thing, there were certain things, if I would just hear about the story, like the walk of our people, or I would hear about other thing happens to other Indians, you know, a long time ago, I get very rageful. I mean, just get really pissed about it. And I say, look, then was then, now is now, what's the matter with you? But one of the things like when we work in the communities that we find is very important for us to look at in recovery is this intergenerational healing. And that means this. When they started a long time ago, the boarding schools, some of the Indian schools, that was really initiated by the Department of War. And it was a strategy to assimilate Native people back into dominant culture. And that's documented. That's not like a secret. But when they grew up, and all the ways that they got the kids into the schools, the ones that they got in there, which was a large portion of the children then, but they were successful in that they taught them, hey, being Indian, don't speak your language, don't speak your culture, see, don't do no ceremonies, don't do this. And they grew up being quite successful, for the most part. Then what do you happen when those kids got married? And how did they raise their children? Hate being Indian, don't speak your language, the culture is bad. Then they have a grown up and then they raise children. We work with youth right now that have not attended boarding school, and they have boarding school behavior. You can recognize it, the way that they talk. And the way that they are punished by their parents is the way boarding school was punished 3 and 4 generations ago. They make them kneel on things. They do the same thing to them. So sometimes today, we don't know why. I mean, there's some level sometimes that is just like when I started going back to the culture. My mom was raised in boarding school. So I started to want to relearn the language and letting my hair grow long again. Made her mad. She said, why are you letting your hair grow like that? That's stupid. And don't be speaking that language around here. I don't want to be hearing that here. You know? And I started to see that I grew up that way. There's some things happen in boarding school directly affects us even as recovery people. I talked to an elder in our, because I've been interested in this boarding school, so I'm starting to understand I have boarding school behavior in part of my recovery. I have to look at, I'm not trying to blame anyone. See, I'm fully accountable for my growth. It doesn't matter, my uncle molested me, that happens. I'm accountable to change myself because I want to be happy. But I talked to this elder, he said, he's an uncle of mine. But he said we went to mission school. First day they got there at night, they put them all, in class, or, to bed and everything. But they brought him over the next morning, and the priest brought him into the school, and he said, I want to have a talk with you all about your behavior and about how I want you to mind me. So he talked to him, the elder said, then he took him downstairs, they have a furnace there. And he talked to them about doing exactly what he said. He didn't want to be, But then what he did was he had all his kids line in front of this furnace, and he reached in this box. He took a lid off that box. He pulled out a cat, and he opened up that door, and he just threw that cat in the furnace alive and shut that door. And this elder, he's like 87, just broke down and cried. That type of hurts. A lot of us are raised by people have experienced many, many things like that. And when we look at getting in recovery, where do we get stuck? That's the things we got to start looking at. When they start to surface, to understand there's other things intergenerationally that has affected us. There's a lot of sexual molestation went on in the boarding schools. Nobody wants to say that. But sometimes we're working with some elders, they'll tell you what went on there, and it wasn't pleasant. There was people, women, we know some, is early 40s, younger than me, that were sterilized when they were in boarding school, with no medicine, no nothing. They held them down on tables. That went on. That wasn't like in the 1800s. They're now healing and processing that kind of stuff. So I think part of recovery is to look at intergenerational stuff also, because many of us it's like I started to understand why my parents were like they were. It was just all of a sudden my relationship with them changed, because I didn't know, it was like you don't know what you don't know. I said, how could an Indian parent tell their children to don't be Indian, don't be speaking your language, don't go back to the culture, it's bad, leave it alone, don't go that. Now I understand. So before, I couldn't understand. Does that make sense? And those are the things like when we are in recovery a longer periods, we need to start even looking at that and see what is that effects on us. Because even some of the children now, that's still happening today in many other schools. How many here was to boarding school, just out of curiosity? I see quite a few. All right.
I heard you say something about that cycle in the truck. I'm in a confusing area right now, and I'm a single parent. I've had my kid ever since he was 3 days old on my own, and I'm doing the best I can to raise him. And coming from an alcoholic family, and my father in recovery, and
made sense what you said about the different changes made. My father's in one area and I'm in another. Because when we connect, we explode, you know. And I see myself taking those same things home with me when I go home. And I see myself reacting to my kids sometimes like that. Sometimes it's kind of hard to you know, I heard what Al was saying about trust. You know, and it's like, how you, I'm confused about what are you supposed to do when you're selling something and then you can't do it because we have other responsibilities. I mean, it's like, you know, I clean my own house, my own laundry, you know, and he's a very big house, you know, and then tell him, well, we'll go ride bikes, and then, you know, and then I not have the time, and then, I'm pumped. Broke down and tired. You know, what do you do in situations like that? You know, I'm not here to hurt my kids. I have no intention to hurt my kids. And I don't know how to balance that. You know, when you see the same thing as children, 28 years old, 29 years old, you know, and I see those same things with my dad telling me something, and then, you know, it changed. I can't figure out the balance with that. And I don't know how to. I have no idea about it.
Well, when we get into steps this afternoon, into the workshops, we'll be looking at a lot of that. Because I think when you start to look at understanding the interconnectedness and a lot of the thing about the steps, I think that a person has the ability to really look forward to the steps as an interconnected system that allows each individual to really accelerate growth. It isn't about wallowing in it forever. And it's about learning, you know, where to focus. It's sort of like you can't fix that which you don't know is broke. And very often we focus so much on a couple of things we think we're all screwed up. You know, it's like your car doesn't run, you take it to the garage, you say, your car's all messed up, it's all broke, God, it's going to cost me millions to do it. You take it there, first thing has to be done is to identify where it's broke. Carburetor needs to be adjusted, brakes need to be fixed, you got a flat tire. We do those three things, you can start running. But we say, no, everything's broke. But we're not as broke as we would like to think that we are. But it's a matter of locating that right place and then learning to use tools on focus and to live a balanced life. The Creator made a harmonious system. Because we were alcoholic, whatever, went out and did some stuff. It doesn't mean I have to wait for 15 years before I can have a harmonious life. It's to the degree that I come back and work with the principal laws and values, and then it starts to happen. Right? So we'll take a look at that part of the steps this afternoon on how to identify things quickly and make adjustments and not tear ourselves up in the process of recovering.
I think one of the most important things that all of us go through, like Sam, you know, like a key issue right now, he's able to identify that there's something that possibly wrong, and he's able to dialogue it and willing to do something about it. Like even for myself, you know, being in recovery, like I enjoy being a parent, and I want to always be a good parent. And whenever I see anything free for parenting classes, I go, you know, and I learn. And then I take it, and I try it out, and it doesn't work, and I look for another workshop, or ask friends of mine. But, you know, it works, you know, but I think he's on the right track because he's just able to identify it right now. And it sounds to me like he's willing to work on it, or we talk about it.
Yes.
Well, for me, the best thing I've ever done was I got involved in allocating. And that's where I learned what's, closer to normal, what I should have felt. For me, it took, the blessing first, not the same thing as God and AA. And then about a year later, getting into adult children's alcoholics and steps in that and all that. And 5 years ago, on October 11th, I woke up to a big world. I was raised in Wisdom, Missouri, and I was living in Wisdom, Missouri today. And I've never seen it free the way it is. No record, no music, no tape, not one person, nothing inside there. Familiar with it whatsoever. But I had Al-Anon for support. and did for a fourth and fifth step twice in 2 years. I got a first person, and then when I got into Albuquerque, by all those kids, none of them were kids. Like I had grandkids guys for free from my dad, and then my granddad was later in the military. So, and then I got these with the harness off of a Belgian workhorse, hit full strength, and my dad was stronger than harness, and never ever hit me again. I was out for a long time that time, but it's been a help. But the kids, they taught me. I needed to learn what a kid 4, 5, 6, 7 needs to know, and I learned it from them. All the kids knew more than I did. Thanks.
Okay. Looking at these developmental stages, they trigger a lot of good things, but we're really just trying to set up to do that. This afternoon we'll learn mind mapping, how to trigger more. We're going to workshop in groups, capitalizing one another's experiences where that's appropriate for us to share something. But we'd like to finish these stages because I think they are very, very important yet. When we get through our age of our late teens, like 19, 20, that's the first time that it's sort of like, it's at that point we can walk off the stage of life, like pretty much just like all before that we've been acting, trying to figure all this stuff out. But once we get our identity, we know why we are, who we are, and where we're going. It's like you can get off that stage finally, like when you're 20, and you say like, I now know who I am, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, and if you don't like it, stuff it. Right? It's like you get off that stage of life. You're just not around like people pleasing. But then next we will go to this stage of intimacy, and that still happened between maybe the 20s to 30s or so. And it's at that age the human being needs to develop the ability to share their feelings. It's about building relationships. I need to be able to tell you my opinion whether you agree with me or not. See, I need to be able to share that. And you see like college students, you ever notice they're sitting at the student union, whatever, they just talk, and they come home from school and they have opinions on everything. They know the government should run, this is screwed up, that's bad, tribal councils like this, geez, who hired that one? Look at that jerk. And they just have opinions on everything, when they're in that. Now you'll see them even talking to one another. You'll see one talking, the other one's listening. You ever notice that other one's not listening? They're thinking the up-one'smanship story, just waiting for them to get done. See, then they go back and they go, you think your mother was bad? Let me tell you about my mother, how bad she was, see? So they start to switch stories back and forth. Now you see, these things are like building. So let's just say that I am in this age of, or as a human being in relationships. Do you think I have the ability to be intimate in relationships if I don't know who I am? Do you think I have the ability to be effective in relationships if I cannot trust? Do you think I have the ability to be intimate in relationships if I don't have these feelings about myself? I'm good at something, I'm good for something feelings? See, but I have the ability to come back in areas where I'm off, I can rebuild myself. So a lot of times if I'm having issues in relationships, I got to take a look at the steps. There's other key things I need to notice. When I look at unmanageability, or I'm writing inventory, I'm looking for these patterns. I need to be able to see these patterns, you see where I'm off track. Then knowing and working step 10 and 11 is where I go and rebuild myself back so I get that right away. We don't need, to wallow in it forever. Because very often, if we don't know these things, so if I have issues in relationships, the relationship is not the issue. There's something I need to look at inside of myself. So how do I go find that so I can change that? So as I come back and I can discover what that is, then you'll see relationships will improve. But when I get through this intimacy, then I go to this age of generativity, and this might be, 40 to 50s. And that generativity is then the need for the human being to to do something for others. I have to be a giving person. You see, a lot of people will just be involved in volunteer work, and they do all sorts of stuff just free. In other words, they do it not for credit or glory or to get something back. They just do it because they have to do it. It just makes them feel good. So you see, a lot of times it's at that point where prior to that we're takers, but we'll get to that age of generativity, then all of a sudden we got to go and do something for some. You just got to do it, see, in order to be happy. Then we enter the age of the elders, the stage of integrity. That stage of integrity of the elders, that's at that point, if you notice, if you ever watch elders that have integrity, see, you just kind of see a worthwhileness to all things. When you go there, you're like a mouse just wound up on this little thing, and they just sit there and they just kind of see it all connected, even the conflict. Right? They just see a worthwhileness to all things. Usually when you have integrity, you're at that stage of the elder, by then you have developed your own set of codes by which you live your life. Like when we were younger, a lot of times, you ever notice, if you're honest, the real reason we don't do things is because I might get caught, and that's the reason I don't do them. Right? If I knew I wouldn't get caught, I'd give it a go. But I better not, because I might get caught. But see, the elders, they've gotten past that. They just do it because it's not right for them. They seem to have a philosophy that it's okay to be who you are. You don't have to be like how they think to be okay. It's okay to be young. It's okay to be a breed. It's okay to be white and this. It's okay to, right? It's okay to be a man. It's okay to work. It's okay not to work. You don't see them, well, what is your amount of blood? Are you a traditional? Or you are an urban one that you don't know nothing about here. They don't spend this time getting things in buckets and categories and all that. It's okay. If you're Indian this much, you're Indian. And you're all right. You don't see them getting all hung up, you see, like we are sometimes. So what I thought I would do is just kind of show that those developmental stages before we take a look at the steps, so we have a form of reference. That when we start to look at unmanageability and we start to look at those, that we're looking at the Creator did make a path for the human being to grow mentally healthy. Many of us did not have the opportunity to do that. So it's not mom's fault, it's not dad's fault, it's not the way I was born's fault. Right? The issue is I am accountable to correct my life. It doesn't matter who did it. And later on this afternoon we'll also talk about the ability to forgive the unforgivable. But there's certain things sometimes that we need to do if I want to have the style of life that sobriety has to offer. Sobriety is just not about not drinking. It's about another whole style of us coming back to all those things that is available to us in our culture. And it's about living. So we'll talk about those things. Did we only get those lights? Because you see, if we take a look at, very often when we are measuring things, we're always looking at results. You ever ask yourself, where do results come from? Every result will be preceded by an action. Cannot be no other way. The Creator made everything to run by a system of laws. So then you say, well, where do actions come from? You ever notice? You got to think them. They don't just magically appear. So if I think a certain thing, it causes an action, shows the result in my life. Well, where does thinking come from? Well, it comes from here, the human being. Basically, the human being is 98% of everything that we do is run by 8 thought patterns. It's not like it's all as complicated as we think. There's just thought patterns we do and we just repeat them. Then we say, what is it that drives the being? It's our will, our free will. The Creator designed us to function from free will. And what is it that drives our will? Our spirit and intent. So we want to change the results. See, there's this definition of insanity. It says you can't keep thinking what you're thinking and doing what you're doing and expect different results. Right? You want different results, there's something that has to change that result. And that's how we'll be looking at the steps from an Indian point of view. All right. Any comments? All right. So when we come back from our lunch, we're going to take this and apply it to the 12 steps to see how does all these concepts fit into the 12 steps. So we're starting at let's start at 1:02. 2 minutes after 1. 2 minutes after 1. 1:02. We'll start. Go on to the next step, and I think there was one important thing, I guess my own experience when I first got into looking at doing the steps, and I talked to a sponsor about that, was remember in this one diagram here, we talked about that flow of results. And what it says there basically is that the human being, it never does anything unless the will says it's okay. So everything always has to pass through the will. I will do this or I will not do this. Then, depending upon which way I go, then the results go. And the reason for that is that the Creator designed us to function from free will. And that if we do anything other than a free will, then we are designed to push back or not do it. So if I could just pick on you, if I have you put your hand on mine, if you would. If you notice, as soon as I push without saying a word, it pushes back. But if I ask, could I push your hand, then you get cooperation. Now that's physically. We are designed that anytime anyone pushes us, we push back. Well, it's also designed, we are designed mentally to push back anytime something is against our will. You're supposed to. See, true motivation to get the full force, the first full motivation, is always when we do something on a want to, choose to, like it, love it. I want to do that. See, I choose to do the steps. I love to do them. I want to walk the red road. But as soon as the mind hears I have to, it has a little mechanism that wakes up and says, oh, no, you don't. I'll get you out of it. So it very creatively kicks in a system to have you go do something else. You get procrastination. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. See, so this voice, in a sense, this force starts to kick in to get us to not do it. So we always function at that level of the free will. So what I'm saying there is that really applies a lot when you come to working steps. Why are you working steps? Well, I have to so I don't get drunk. Not. See, that little voice wakes up and says, no, you don't. See, I'll get you out of it. So what we're saying is, if you're telling yourself you have to work the step because my sponsor says I have to, that little thing wakes up and says, I'll get you out of it. So it starts all these little plans to divert you to do something else. Now, there are no have-tos in the whole world except one. See, you don't have to work steps to stay sober. There are thousands of people in AA staying sober and they never worked a lick of steps in their lives. Now, they're miserable as shit. Now, that's true. You see, the only catcher is you make the choice, you have to take the consequence. So, like getting sober or whatever, it's sort of like a banquet. On that banquet, as many things are available. Steak, lobster, right? Buffalo T-bone, whatever. But then it works its way down to meatloaf and to cheeseburgers, and on this end's peanut butter. So if you want peanut butter sobriety, see, then you don't get steak by not working steps. You can get peanut butter sobriety, but the only problem with that, see, peanut butter always sticks to the roof of your mouth, you know. Love my sobriety. So what I'm saying is, in looking at the steps, if you were saying you have to do it, don't do it because you won't anyway. Right? Not only you, but you have a mental resistance because we're only designed to function from free will. So the only catcher is there are no have-tos really in the whole world except one, is we have to die. But pretty much everything else is a matter of choice. So you don't have to pay taxes. See, don't pay them. Now there's a catcher. There's always a consequence for every choice. You don't pay taxes, you end up in jail. Well, that's true. But you do not have to pay taxes. Now you get in jail, you can get out of jail in 1 day, or maybe 2 at the most. If you're in jail, you want to get out, hang yourself. So you'd be out in a pine box. That's true. But I don't want to, die. Well then, shut up and pay your taxes. See, but do it on a want to, choose to, like it, love it. So I think it's important for a person to think just a little bit about that in terms of steps. You do not have to work steps to stay sober. Honest to God, you don't. Don't do it. But there's a consequence for that. But if you want to be free, want the freedom, you want the promises, you want whatever that is, then steps will get you that. So if you want that, then do it on a want to, choose to, like it, love it. Not because you have to, because you don't. A lot of people stay sober and never work steps. But they never taste the honey either. Right? So this is about tasting the honey of life. So I think it's very, very important to take a look at deciding. See, what works in the decisions is I choose to do this. I want to do this. So then you align all the powers of will, and you don't have that little resistance thing. You know, if you ever notice when you tell yourself you have to do something, you ever notice that you very creatively go do something else? And you say, geez, I intended to do that. I have to do this today or else. And then it seems like we never end up doing it. So I think it's important to come to terms with that. You're going to work the steps, do them because you want to, because you really won't anyway. If you tell yourself you have to do them, you won't.